Friends, good news. Multiple job offers are back. Today's business analyst interview questions were shared by a member of our WhatsApp group. She recently received 3 offers from companies like CGI, Wipro, and Deloitte. Hello, everyone, and welcome to CareersTalk. My name is Suran Sharma. I'm an agile consultant based in Netherlands, and on this channel, we invite industry experts to share their valuable experience and insight with all of us. Before we get started, if you are new to our channel, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and join our CareersTalk family. At the end of the session, don't forget to smash that like button and leave a comment to let us know what you thought about this session. Your support means a lot to us and it helps us to keep bringing you valuable content. So without further delay, let's get started. Welcome, Neha, and thank you for joining us today. Neha, over to you.
Thank, thank you, Sunan, for having me in this session. So, many of my friends have watched your channel and got job offers. So, it's my pleasure to be here as a guest speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So if you allow, shall we start?
Yes, Sunan.
Okay. So the very first question is you are analyzing user behavior for a mobile app and you notice a significant drop off at a specific stages in the user journey. So how would you investigate the cause of this drop off and what different methods would you use to gather and analyze all this data from the user journey to identify the potential improvement over the period of time? Yeah, over to you.
Uh, for this question, I would typically you bring in two or three multiple components from a business analyst point of view. First is data analysis. I would start with the quantitative data to pinpoint where exactly this drop off occurs. And there will be different metrics that any app firm monitors. When we were in that area, we used to monitor conversion rate, session duration. All this will give you enough insights on what exactly is happening. We also have new tools like Google Analytics, Firebase, which can help me to drill down the pattern based on the user profile. And typically, I would need to do a user journey mapping because I need to know which exact place or flow wherein this drop off occurs, whether it is at a payment gateway, whether it is expecting some response from some other system. This would like help me determine what exactly is happening in that area. And once I find that out based on this quantitative and qualitative data, I will do a root cause analysis. Typically, many companies have many ways of doing it. So we generally go with 5 whys or fishbone diagram to drill down to root cause of why it is happening. Once it is done, I'm still not clear on this drop off. I would also take a user feedback or surveys. Definitely user feedback or survey in terms of people who have successfully cleared that path and got a final end to end, and also those who have dropped off. So your user survey population has to be wide enough to cater all these two segments. And once I done, I will also do a usability testing of my app. See, there can be multiple UX issues also. So when we were in doing that mobile app for our internet banking site, we noticed that people click in the non-clickable areas like because of design issues. So adjusting the button or giving a contrast and simple things like that could also be an issue. So I would also do a round of usability testing. Once all this is done, I would do a performance analysis, technical performance analysis, like API failure or crashes, and I would also do a testing for solution validation, and then keep monitoring this user stats or this quantitative and qualitative data. I will keep on monitoring till I am sure that this solution is finalized. So this is how, Sunand, I would approach this problem.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that elaborated answer. Yeah. So shall we move on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay. So let's say that your team is working on developing a new feature for, let's say, e-commerce platform. And during a sprint planning session, a developer raised a concern about a user story that is not, detailed enough. So how would you approach refining these user stories to ensure that it is clear and, actionable for the developers? So if you can share what steps would you take to gather more information, that will be great.
Okay. So in our team, we typically have something called definition of ready. Like when are those user stories ready to be taken up by the development team? So technical team, they generally have some criterias, right? UX elements should be finalized, mocks should be ready, and a requirement should be frozen. So unless all those are ready, development team will not pick up a particular story. So we have something called this definition of ready. So I would insist that all the agile teams should follow this because it makes it makes a product owner really commit to his story and give him all the details before user story is being picked up. In this case also, I would make sure that my scrum team follows this. And then a few other items like I would start revisiting the user story purpose with the team. If it definitely lacks detail, I would gather more details from the business team. And also in our company, we follow this. All the user stories should follow the inverse criteria. Inverse criteria is very common in agile world, and everyone would be knowing that it is independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, small, and testable. So if the user story is following all this criteria, that is a definition of a good user story. So we generally follow it. And also many of the problems like developer typically faces would be clarified if we have a clear acceptance criteria. So I would try to clarify or provide it acceptance criteria as clear as possible. And then we also have a user story refinement section with QA developers and testing team. We have it on schedule at every week. So does many agile, many Scrum team. So this would be a practice. If this is a practice, then developers or the technical team will not come to a while during the sprint and say that user story is lacking detail. So I would also insist this as one of the best practice. And then I would also gather information from other Scrum teams on how they are following their standards in the story. And if the typically many of the problems would occur because we have a large story, so we break it down into smaller story. Some of the teams won't even accept smaller stories, but smaller the story, easy it is to manage. So this is another thing I would follow. And then if there is a documentation issue like assumptions and dependencies, so many of us miss to note it down that especially a technical dependency or a technical assumption, all those should be documented in a user story, or there should be at least a reference point where these things can be referred. So definitely I would follow all those steps to make the user story clear. So over to you, Sunan. Hope
Yeah.
this answer is
Yeah.
clarifies.
Yes. Great. Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. Let's
Yeah.
move on to the next one. So let's say during a project, you are presented with a proposed software architect that you believe might not scale well, as the user demand increase over the period of time. So how would you evaluate the proposed architecture, and what factors would you consider? Like, how would you communicate your concerns to your team and other stakeholders? So if you can throw some light, that will be great.
Okay. So typically, every business analyst comes across this software architecture at the beginning of the project. So some of us would have even faced this scenario, and those who are in an mobile app or internet app kind of projects, definitely we would have faced this. So most likely I would go for a load handling. So how much load my app can currently handle. I would also uh, project it with the data on current number of users and current number of transactions, and how much this proposed architecture can handle it, and whether it has horizontal scaling capability. Like if I add more features, how would the architecture behave? Or if I add more number of users, how would the architecture behave? Next is these days everything is modular. So if the architecture is limited, but it can be scaled easily based on some other technical aspect, we are fine with that too. As long as that scalability issues are addressed, we are fine. I would check that whether the architecture has that modular design. Also on data storage and management. So currently, this is the capacity. What happens if we have 4x growth that we are projecting, whether the data storage and management aspects are handled? And how about the fault tolerance, like redundancy, failover? How are those handled? Once I have ascertained this data, I would most of the key thing as a product owner is communicating. So we have to communicate in a language that all the stakeholders buy in from us. So rather than projecting it as a mistake or something, we can project it as an opportunity for improvement. Uh, so our growth is 10x from the current user count. So this architecture doesn't seem to have that 10x growth factor, and the cost of implementing, we can also utilize those data points, like cost of doing it once right, rather than scaling up at a later stage and trying to switch over to a different architecture at a later stage. And rather than going on a fault finding mode, we have to go and propose a solution, like catching mechanism, consider microservices or cloud based scalability tool. All those are very much being used by any mobile app company. So I will also suggest that. And then I will also help to collaborate different sections with existing teams, and an already team who has already done in a large scale. I will also do that. And moreover, as a business analyst, we should always take it back to the business impact. We should say that in terms of stakeholder perspective, in terms of our business perspective, this is what is expected in another 2 or 3 years. So given this architecture, we will not be there in another 3 years. So all those reasons, along with proper communication, would resolve the issue. So Sunan, this is how I would approach.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for that. Great. Okay. Let's move on. The next question is, let's say you are supposed to integrate a new payment gateway API into the existing application. And
Hmm.
during the initial review, you discover that the API documentation is incomplete. So, how would you manage this kind of situation, and what different steps would you take to ensure a successful integration while you have to address all these gaps in the documentation part?
Okay. I should say that I have even faced that scenario in a real time. So in this case, what I have done is that gone through the documentation and seriously identified gaps where exactly those details are missing. Say some of those might be some sections which are it is a real documentation issue, not an gap in terms of feature. So in those cases, I would highlight those and go back to the concerned payment provider technical support team and ask for the clarity on missing detail. If they have a specific, so say some many of those technical support team has a online documentation. So if they provide any online documentation, that would be good. Else, I would try and understand from the team on the target, asking the targeted questions on accurate information. Otherwise, if there is an the kind of a forum or community for this kind of payment apps, many of the payment apps have the community from or focused forum in which I can also take those details. Second is we we have many sandbox environment to test the APIs, whether it is a sample call or end-to-end checkpoint. All those things we can do it nowadays. So I will use this documentation to do a round of testing in the sandbox environment, and I would also make sure that. Uh, whether all the scenarios are captured in the documentation. Say, for example, some error handling, all those things are not captured. I would note all those down and I would take the support of technical team, in those case, the vendor team, to get those answers for that and update it myself. I would also use my company's existing projects who have been using this particular payment API. If they have been using, I would take their help too. I can also take help from GitHub or any other development communities where these kind of examples or how to approach this situation would be available. Main thing is I should also document all this thing and make this comprehensive as I work through this integration. I should also keep all the stakeholders, like we should have the business team or technical management team, all our higher ups informed about all this process, because all this will be a trial and error process. Many a times incomplete documentation can delay several things, so we should also keep them informed. So this is how I would approach this situation, Sunan.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. Great. Let's move on to our next question. Next question is on UAT. So let's say you are leading a UAT phase for a critical software release, and some of the stakeholders are reluctant to participate. Like they are coming up with some excuse. Let's say they are having a busy schedule and things like that. So how would you encourage stakeholder to participate in a UAT? And how do you ensure that their feedback is incorporated properly into the final product? Yeah.
Okay. In this case, though we are in agile environment and everyone should be working in a sprint, many of the time the clients, if they have to involve in testing, they have a lot many things to handle and they don't generally come to the testing participation. This is what I have observed. In our case, typically for my day-to-day project, I inform stakeholders well in advance of this is the typical time where I would require you for testing. I would also give them enough notice so that they are available. Second, most if they aren't available, I would take the business scenario from them. Generally, we have two different testing team and then a final business testing. The what our internal testing team tests will be nowhere relevant to what business wants. So the taking those testing scenarios from the client and then giving to our QA team would make sure that their scenarios and all those concern areas are addressed internally. This is something we will do, and so typically client testing would be done by our internal QA team so that it is addressed. And then I will schedule a demo wherein I would say that this was your requirement, this is how we have tested, and this is how it is. Would you like to participate? If they are not, we would do the testing on their behalf and then send the screenshots, various testing evidences to say that at least go through this now and say whether you are ready to sign this off and then take it. So this is how I would typically handle it, Sunan.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, great. Let's move on. So next question is on process map. So let's say your organization is experience a delay in project delivery due to lot of unclear processes. So and you have been asked to create a process map to identify all these inefficiencies. So what step would you take to create a effective process map, and how are you going to involve the stakeholder into this process? Yeah.
Okay, sure. So I would start with the basics of what exactly is my immediate deliverable or what should I focus on. An organization can be doing multiple things wrong. All those cannot be scope of my process flow or process map. So I would just try to focus, break down the process by focusing my area section by section. So I would identify that which of the particular process is causing huge delay and go for the particular process. I would also try try and understand what is currently being followed, whether it is like many of the time there would be some existing documentation. So I would go through that and see what exactly is the lag, or I can do a job shadowing. I would typically try to observe what is being done and then proceed with that. If people are ready to talk about it, I would conduct an interview and workshop to understand what is the current process being followed. So based on all this, I would have some clear cut information of current process, and then using what I have gathered, I would do an initial process map, like identify key steps, activities, so major task, what is the exact decision point. I would create that flow. I would also maintain that BPM and business process model notation so that it is consistent throughout. Once this step is done, once I have a draft process map, I would invite all those stakeholders. So I can create a number of process map. It is going to be of no use unless and until stakeholders agrees to follow the process map or tell me where exactly is the problem. So I would focus more on conducting a collaborative session with stakeholders to understand how this new process map will work or whether they have any inputs on this new map. Once I have done that, I would also facilitate open communication regarding the same. Based on this input, I would refine this process map. I would update based on those input, and then I would finally share this process maps with all the stakeholders involved, and then I would keep it available in a common repository and then train everyone to read this process map and follow this process map. So this training is typically important because we can create the process map. What is important is people should understand and follow it. Once this is done, I would monitor for some time to understand the effectivity. If it is not effective, I would just go back again to the drawing board to refine this. So this is again a continuous improvement process. I will have to do it for a few iterations till it is settled. So Sunan, this is how I would approach this problem.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. Great. Let's move on. So next question is, let's say you are working on a product requirement document, which is PRD, for let's say some new feature, but one of your stakeholders expect the features to work differently. So how would you align these expectations to make sure that the PRD meets the business needs? And yeah, I mean, what step would you take to finalize this document?
Okay, so in this question, typically I would try to understand this stakeholder's perspective. So he might have his expectation and rational for the desired functionality. So the best one product owner has to do is at least have few discussions with the stakeholder to understand the background behind this requirement and clarify it. So once that is done, if the stakeholder has a genuine requirement, I would go back to the project scope. Anything a typical product owner does should always align it back to a business or a project goal. So if it fits the project goal, and if I have genuinely missed it, I would have to accept it and then include it in our project. Whether it is in backlog, whether it is in next iteration is another thing. I should include it in the project scope. So to do that, I would have a discussion with the business team on saying there is such requirement from the stakeholder and take their concurrence to include it in the project scope. Once this is done, uh, there is a typical need to have a different workshop on how this new requirement would fit in with our earlier requirement. This is required with other stakeholders, project managers, etc. So I would do that. I would take ownership of that and clarify this with other teams as well. And once this is done, I would document all these requirements, whether in the form of PRD, and I would communicate it to the stakeholder who has raised it on saying, here is how I have documented, whether he is okay now. Once he is okay with the way that requirement has been captured in the PRD, I would finalize the PRD and take the sign off. This is how I would typically handle this, Sunan.
Okay, great, wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Let's move on. So let's say you need to communicate a complex system integration to both technical and non-technical stakeholders using a few diagrams. So what types of diagram would you consider using in this case? And how do you ensure that all your diagrams are understandable by all of your audience? So they are both technical and non-technical.
Okay. So typically, a product owner or a business analyst has to talk in multiple languages. So to do that, most of us would follow different diagrams. Uh, to business, it is always about what features are getting delivered and when. So a higher level flow or something is typically done for business, and for a technical team, it is like drilling down to detail. So both of them need a different type of diagram. So in this case, I would use a system context diagram. So this will cover the external entities, users, systems, and data sources. This would provide an overall view for non-technical stakeholders. And then I would also use data flow diagram. This data flow diagrams, many of us would have used it. It is very great to show how data interacts with different process and all that. I would use it mainly for the technical team. For non-technical team, I would use use case diagrams. Use case diagrams are really great in saying how users typically interact with the system. So I would use case diagrams for non-technical audience. Sequence diagram, I would use it for technical stakeholders because they break down a step, show the interaction between different systems, So sequence diagram is good for technical audience. And then for both the audience, I would use component diagram for higher level component diagrams for a non-technical audience. Once I would break it down to a level for technical audience. So irrespective of whatever diagrams I use, one thing that has to be maintained is simplicity and labeling. So many of the times we produce diagrams which it is not friendly to understand. So use lot of visual cues, colors, icons, and symbols to denote, differentiate process components so that it is clear, and add those annotations and explanations in those diagrams, and also engage with different stakeholders and in terms of explaining this diagram. Most of the time the issue with diagrams is the readability. So if there is the initial understanding to them on how to read and understand this diagram, most of them it will be simple to handle. So this hope this answers your question, Sunan.
Yes, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so let's move on to our next question. So your team used Jira for project management, but you notice that your backlog is not being prioritized. Yeah, I mean it's not ordered properly. So that lead to a lot of confusion among the team members. So how are you going to address this issue? Maybe you going to talk to the product owner, or let's say, what different steps would you take to improve your backlog prioritization? And you have to ensure that your team is aligned on the most critical task first, right? So it's a typical difficult situation, and yeah, let's see how you're going to tackle it.
To do this, I would have to understand what is currently being uh, followed. So, current understanding this current prioritization process with a current product manager or the technical team to understand how it is done, and like if there is any gaps, say for the time, just this is in July release, so I am taking it to July release. If organization has such policies, I can identify that. Then next step is understand the business goals and vision. So there will be typical goals like I need to have this web page at the end of this quarter or something, some other goal. So our prioritization process should always take us towards that goal. So once I would also get those goals confirmed with our business team. Once this is done, I would do a prioritization of backlog. I would identify those. We typically follow Moscow, must have, should have, could have, and don't have during our prioritization process. I understand many of the teams also use RISE model, reach, impact, confidence, and effort. So one any one of this prioritization criteria for our current backlog items, and then I would schedule this backlog refinement session at least once once before every sprint, or twice in a month. We typically have it twice in a month. So wherein we will discuss about which are all the important. We do the refinement with all the development team. So we review, prioritize, do everything in this session. So I would use that. After doing all this, Jira has many custom filters and tools to make this prioritization easy. So I would use all those to create the custom dashboard. So which wherein it will highlight the top priority items. Many of the time point problem is visibility. No, we will be following some process, but users or developers or business team would not know that where to find it. So I often find those information readily available will solve many of this problem. So I would use all those Jira dashboards and filters to make the things very visible. Once this is done, my backlog would be in correct priority and it will be refined. So I would communicate this status to our technical team and everyone. I would also do a regular catch up with other stakeholders to understand whether this prioritization is being effective. So, since all the prioritization, all the refinement is a continuous process, I would do this for few iterations to see that whether I am following the correct process. So, this is how I would take it, Sunan.
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Nia, for that. And with this, I think we are just came to end of our session. So thank you again, Nia, for sharing all the detailed answers. And yeah, all the best for your next assignment. And thank you, friend, for joining us for today's session. We hope you found it helpful and informative. And if you enjoyed the session, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We hope to see you in our next session. Until then, take care. This is Sunil Sharma signing off. Bye, everyone. And thank you, Nia, one more time.
Thank you, Sunand, for giving me this opportunity. It was really wonderful to talk to the audience and interesting set of questions, also, I should say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sunand.